So for my working cover video, I talked briefly about bore offset and how to work with that when you're working around pieces of cover, but I also want to discuss that as it applies to up-close precision accuracy. Now, that's going to apply when you're on the airsoft field, especially in CQB or out in field environments where there are buildings, because let's say you have an enemy who is poking their hand out from behind a piece of cover with their handgun or with their rifle, and you want to shoot them in the hand because that's what they're giving you, but you aim your dot on their hand, you pull the trigger, round goes under their hand. Why is that? That's because of bore offset. That is the distance between this red dot that I'm using to sight and the center of this bore. Now, that bore offset is offset, for lack of a better term, when you zero your red dot or your optic, because then that dot is going to be at your point of impact when you zero it. But you're gonna zero it for a given distance, and for most people, for myself included, I zero it right around about 120 feet. And I find 120 feet to be a good distance because that's generally about as far as you can get before on a windy day your rounds start to sail one way or the other, and at that point you're using your dot as a reference for your Kentucky windage. But at 120 feet or less with this Crytac generally, it's pretty much dead on. But then when you get up close, you're gonna run into issues where your rounds are going below your point of aim, again because of that bore offset. So to demonstrate that, I have this target right up here, and I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna put the dot on that top bullseye, and then I'm going to show you the point of impact. So from right here, this is not very far. This is maybe 10 feet away. At some fields, you wouldn't even be shooting this close. Depends on what your gun chrono's at. But I put that dot right on there. Look at where that hit. So I want you to take a look at this. I had my dot right on this X, and this is where the round hit. So that's a distance of just about 3 inches almost. So when I take my Crytac and I put the barrel right up against the point of impact, look where that dot lines up against. Right up on that X. So that's a perfect example of your point of impact shift based on bore offset at close range. So with that in mind, what can I do when I'm in this type of situation to make sure that that round goes into that center circle on that X? Because again, that X might be an enemy player's hand that they're reaching around a piece of cover, or it might be a foot that's under a piece of cover, or it could be anything. I'm trying to hit that guy, because in airsoft, doesn't matter where I hit him. If I hit him, he's hit, he has to go back to respawn, I won the gunfight, I'm super awesome, amazing. So what I'm gonna do in order to make sure that I'm hitting that center X is I'm gonna aim about 3 inches above the X. Here we go. All right, so if you look at this target now, you can see that that ragged hole is right on that X. Where did I aim to make that happen? I aimed at the top of this black circle, which is just about 3 inches over that X. So in order to make sure that my rounds are hitting where I want them to at close range, I'm going to aim over where I want my rounds to go. So if you're looking for a good way to practice this to make sure that you are adjusting for your holdovers for the height over bore or the bore offset, then a good way to do that is to either get some bullseye targets like this and practice quickly shooting them at close range so that you know, hey, I'm at this distance, I need to offset this much for my point of impact shifting from my point of aim due to that bore offset. In addition to the bullseye targets, you can also get some partially obscured targets, or you can get some targets that you can partially obscure behind bits of cover. And what you're gonna do there is you're gonna try to hit the scoring zones of those targets as opposed to the non-scoring zones of those targets. So on this VTAC target, for example, there's these black spaces that are the scoring zones on these targets. The VTAC targets are fantastic, by the way. I use them for my rifles and my airsoft shooting. Definitely recommended. But the VTAC targets include these offset-minded targets so that you wanna hit those dark scoring zones as opposed to the unprinted or white non-scoring zones. Okay, and that's bore offset in a nutshell. Hopefully you understand the concept. Hopefully this is something that you'll be mindful of when you're on the field, and like I said, you're trying to make those really precise shots around cover or up and over cover or on small targets at close range. Again, like I said, you may not even be shooting at these distances on some fields, depending on what the rules are. So be mindful of that as well. Don't be a dick. But if you are at one of those fields where this is a thing, or if you are at a field where they have a shooting competition and you need to shoot targets at close range, bear this in mind, and hopefully you found this video helpful. Anyways, this is E-House from Gun Gamers, signing off.